about character, well, a lot actually last time, when we talked about how characters developed and all these emotions and moods. We talked about settings and all the other elements of short stories. But one that I think is important for AP classes is to recognize the significance of a narrator and what the narrator can do to a story, the effect a narrator can have on our perception on characters. Sometimes a clever choice of a narrator adds to a story in a way that is maybe a little bit unexpected. So here is a bit of an excerpt of a short story. It's not the whole story. Okay, there is a bit of an ending later that I'm not giving you yet. And what we're going to do is we're going to read it. And then at the end of it, there is a question on the second page. And you're going to answer this in a paragraph, okay, about the effect the narrator has on our understanding of the main character. So remember, narrator is who? And be careful when you're answering. It's sort of a trick question. It's probably best to not think of a narrator as a writer at all. Some narrators are characters in the story. In this case, there might be, but they're not the main character. In certain points of view, they're not the main character. And that's something that you have to understand. So let's try this. It took months of negotiations to come to an understanding with the old man. He was in no hurry. What he had the most of was time. He lived up in Rio and Medio, where his people had been for hundreds of years. He tilled the same land they had tilled. His house was small and wretched, but quaint. The little creek ran through his land. His orchard was gnarled and beautiful. The day of the sale, he came into the office. His coat was old, green, and faded. I thought of Senator Catron, who had been such a power with these people up here in the mountains. Perhaps it was one of his old Prince Alberts. He wore gloves. They were old and torn at his fingertips, and his fingertips showed through them. He carried a cane, but it was only the skeleton of a worn-out umbrella. White, silent movie type things, right, where the first movie's made and there was him falling on a banana peels and things like that. It's slapstick comedy, but it was really, really popular at his time. So if you know who Charlie Chaplin is, and the comparison, this allusion to him should make sense to you. And the title Don, he's called Don Anselmo. It's not his name. It's a title like Sir. Okay, it's a title used in Spanish for courtesy. Okay, make sense? All right, so the question is on the next page. This is what you're going to be working on for the next 20-25 minutes or so. What is the narrator's perception of Don Anselmo's character? What kind of person does the narrator think Don Anselmo is, in other words? And you're continuing, that's not the whole question. And how do the narrator's thoughts and comments about and dialogue with Don Anselmo affect the reader's perception of Don Anselmo's character? The narrator thinks of Don Anselmo. Okay, how is those thoughts and comments about him? Support your answer with actual quotes from the story, okay? Passages from the story. And after that, you're analyzing, well, how are we thinking about Don Anselmo's character now because of these comments? Do we like him? Do we not like him? What happens? What's going on? What do we think about this character? Okay, let's see what you can come up with. Don't spend too long. Remember, this is a timed activity. So all of this is positive, right? Association with all of that. With Charlie Chaplin. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Think about it.
Yeah.
Where is the setting here? Where are we in this story, do you think? We're not actually developing the setting very well. In fact, it's barely mentioned, but it's still there. Where are we? Think about that for a second. That's what the story is dealing with, right? That's the idea. In the end of the story, there is a problem on the land, and the Don Anselmo has to come down again to the office to deal with the problem because children are coming into this property he sold, and the Americans don't want those children up there, so they want him to talk to these kids and say, don't come in here anymore, this is not your land anymore. And we figure out why Don Anselmo sold it for so cheap. Okay, and that there is something more important than money, and that's ties to that land and the trees that he planted there for everybody and all that. But for now, with that excerpt, we're seeing that we're now confused what to think, right? Is it really all that silly or not? We're creating this tension with the narrator's ideas and with ours. Make sense? Okay, so I will let you finish that paragraph later, okay, when you have your own time, not more than this. Let us completely change gears and move on. All right, so what I want us to do is I am going to share a video screen, and we are going to start our poetry assignments. Do you see this poetry slideshow?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so let me start from the beginning here. So just like last time, we talked about elements of short stories and novels. This time, we're going to be talking about elements of poetry. And what we're going to be using is one poem, and we're going to look at how that one poem illustrates all of these elements in the first place, okay? So things like content, style, form, and sound elements, okay? So here's the poem that we're going to be using. I'm sure you heard of this poem before. It's called Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Have you ever heard of this poem? By Robert Frost?
No.
No, okay, well, that's okay. Even if it's new to you, it's a very, very famous poem that is quite easy to grasp once you understand the elements. So here's how it sounds like. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bell a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and dawny flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Lots to think of here, lots. Are there any words you don't understand in this poem? Any vocabulary issues we need to deal with first? Should be simple words for the most part. Right? So let's figure out what it means. Let's understand all of this. When we're analyzing poetry, readers must think about these things. First of all, content, style, and form. I gave you a mind map before in your packages. You know, the similar kind of mind map that I gave you for elements of novel and short story, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Google Doc. So you can take a look at that a little bit later if you want, but these are the ideas that we're going to focus on. Content is the big one. Content refers to, first of all, what the poem is about, who the poem is about, and really the story inside the poem, what happens in it. Okay, so in this case, this is a very simple kind of story. We have a traveler who stops in the middle of the forest to look at falling snow and the frozen lake, right? He's stopping, he's a rider in the evening on the horse, stops to look at the snow. And he has thoughts about stopping. Make sense? He thinks about how lovely, dark, and deep the forest is, but we also have his feelings that he has to keep going because he made promises, okay? And he has still a long way to go, and he made promises to be there, or whatever there is, and he can't stay for long, but he likes it there. That's what the story is about. Now, many types of poems have characters. They have people, and they have events. So in order to understand the poem, we kind of have to understand the story structure here first. And we kind of got that, right? Any questions about the content so far? Who, what the poem is about?